This story goes back to when I was a teenager, and now that I'm 28, some of the finer details have faded a bit. I'll do my best to fill in the gaps as accurately as I can remember. It was the last night of my summer job at a secluded resort. I was in charge of the front desk during the night shift, a time when the lobby was deserted, and the only sounds were the distant waves crashing against the shore and the occasional call of night birds. The resort was popular for its privacy and beautiful isolated location, which during the day felt like paradise. But at night, the sprawling layout and dim lighting gave this eerie vibe. Like every work shift, I was settled behind the desk reading a book to pass the time between the rare late check-ins or guest requests. This particular night, a heavy storm was rolling in, bringing with it intense rain. I remember I read something about World War II when I suddenly jumped. It sounded like someone knocked, but it was Fade. It wasn't the sound of someone trying to get my attention at the desk. It was coming from the back office behind me. The office was supposed to be empty at this hour, and the door leading to it was always locked as per the management's strict policy. I sat in my chair, and remembering calling out "Who's there?" I got no answer. I stood up and grabbed the key to the back office. The knocking continued, steady and insistent. During my shifts, I've never experienced anything weird or scary, so for me, this was a usual checkout. I arrived, unlocked the door, and pushed it open. The room was dark, the only light coming from the glow of the street lamps outside filtering in through a small window. I fumbled for the light switch and flipped it on. The fluorescent lights flickered to life, humming softly. The room was exactly as I remembered it from my daytime visits. Files stacked neatly on the desk, chairs tucked in. Nothing amiss, yet the atmosphere felt charged, as if someone had just left the room. I was about to turn back when I heard it again. I thought that this time it was coming from the small closet in the corner of the office. This part of the room was not within immediate view from the doorway, and I hadn't checked it when I scanned the room. With every ounce of courage I could muster, I walked toward the closet. My hands were shaking as I reached for the handle. I opened it swiftly. Inside there was nothing but supplies, extra paper, printer cartridges, and some cleaning tools. Just as I was about to close the door and breathe a sigh of relief, a sudden thud echoed down the hallway outside the office. The hallway wasn't large, which made the sound feel alarmingly close. I shut the closet quickly and stepped out into the office, my heart pounding in my chest. The office door was still ajar, and as I peered down the hallway, it seemed endless in the dim light. My first thought was to go back and lock myself in the office, but my gut told me I needed to see what was causing the noise. I stepped out, moving toward the source of the sound, each step hesitant as I listened for any further disturbances. As I reached the end of the hallway, I strained my ears, trying to pick up any sound that might give me a clue about what was happening. Then, to my horror, I heard a soft, scraping sound. I turned around, intending to rush back to the safety of the lobby, but then I saw it. A shadowy figure at the end of the hallway. Before I could comprehend what was happening, it moved with a fast pace toward me. Panic surged through me. I raced back to the front desk, my breath ragged with fear. I grabbed my phone to call the police, but before I could dial, I heard someone running on barefoot. I looked up, and through the front door's glass, I saw a figure. It was a man, or at least it looked like one, wearing a dark hooded robe that covered his face. He stopped just outside the doors. I backed away from the desk, my mind racing. The figure noticed me sitting behind my desk, kept staring down to me. After about 20 seconds or so, he turned and walked away into the night. I locked the doors, called the police, and waited in a back room until they arrived. They found no one and nothing amiss. But the unnerving encounter was enough for them to take the situation seriously. After that night, I never returned to the night shift, and the resort's management increased security. The identity of the man or the meaning behind his ominous visit never came to light, but I knew one thing. I was lucky to have escaped unharmed, and I shuddered to think what might have happened if I didn't notice the figure on time. It was just another shift at the 24-hour convenience store on the edge of town. I had taken this job a few months back to earn some extra cash, thinking it would be an easy gig. Just me, the occasional night owl, and the soft hum of refrigerators. Little did I know that one particular night would turn out to be my biggest nightmare. The store wasn't in the best part of town, sandwiched between an old abandoned warehouse and a rundown apartment complex. It attracted a mix of people, from tired truck drivers to kids trying to buy snacks after a late movie. Most nights were uneventful, with long stretches of silence broken only by the occasional customer. That night, a heavy storm was rolling in, the kind that brought relentless rain and howling winds. It was nearing 2 a.m., and I hadn't seen a customer for hours. The only sounds were the drumming of rain on the roof and the occasional gust of wind rattling the windows. I was restocking some shelves when I heard the bell over the door jingle. I looked up, expecting to see one of the regulars, but the figure that stepped in was unfamiliar. He was tall, with a heavy coat and a hood that shadowed his face. Something about him set me on edge. The way he moved, his eyes scanning the store without really looking at anything in particular. He didn't speak, just wandered the aisles. I tried to shake off the unease and went back to my task, keeping an ear out for the sound of products being picked up or a call for help at the register. But there was nothing. I peeked around the corner and the man was gone. I didn't see him leave, didn't hear the bell ring. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. Chalking it up to my tired mind playing tricks on me, I went back to work. About 15 minutes later, the silence was shattered by a loud crash from the back room where we kept the stock. My heart jumped. It sounded like shelves had fallen over, but I was sure they had been secure. With a deep breath, I grabbed the baseball bat we kept under the counter and edged towards the back room. The air felt colder as I approached, my own breaths seeming loud in the echoing quiet of the store. I reached for the light switch and flicked it on, the fluorescent lights flickering to life with a buzz. The back room looked like a scene from a disaster movie. Boxes and products were scattered all over the floor, but there was no sign of anyone being there. The only exit was a small window at the top of the wall, far too small for someone to fit through. Feeling more nervous now, I began to clean up. Once everything was back in order, I returned to the front, glancing at the CCTV screens to see if they'd caught anything. That's when I noticed it. The cameras had gone black. Not just off, but completely dead. I tried to reboot the system, but it was useless. I decided to do a sweep of the store just to assure myself everything was locked and secure. As I walked through the aisles, checking each lock, I heard it again. The bell over the door. I rushed to the front, expecting to see the weird man from before, or anyone really. But once again, there was nobody there. This time, though, the door was wide open, swaying slightly in the strong wind. My mind raced. Had I forgotten to close it? No, I was certain I had locked it. I shut it firmly, locking it, and turned to scan the parking lot through the front windows. The rain made it hard to see far, but there was a figure standing just on the edge, where the light spilled out into the darkness. It was the same man, staring right at me. I blinked, and like smoke, he disappeared, leaving me staring into the empty, rainy night. I spent the rest of the shift on edge. When my relief came in the morning, I was more than ready to leave. I told my coworker about the night, but he just laughed, saying it was probably just some pranksters having a bit of fun with the new guy. I drove home, shaken by what had happened. The rain was still pouring down, making the streetlights blur and reflect off the wet roads as I drove. Once home, I quickly took a shower, trying to shake off the uneasy feelings. I was so tired I went straight to bed, hoping sleep would help me forget. But I didn't sleep well. The storm kept me awake, which was unusual for me. I tossed and turned, disturbed by bad dreams. At one point I realized I needed to use the bathroom. Still half asleep, I got up and walked down the hallway. When I passed by the stairs, I thought I saw something move down in the living room. I stopped and stared down into the dark, but there was nothing there. You know that weird feeling when you're so tired you might think you see something move. That's what it was. But still, something felt strange. Looking back, I should have listened better to that weird feeling I experienced. I went to the bathroom, did my business, and filled up a glass of water. As I was about to head back to bed, I saw something that made my heart stop. Someone walked into my bedroom across the hall. I didn't think twice. I ran back into the bathroom and locked the door. My heart was pounding as I tried to calm down and think what to do next. Luckily, I had my phone with me because I used it as a flashlight to avoid the bright lights. I dialed 911 as quietly as I could. I whispered to the operator that someone had broken into my house and might still be there. The person on the other end told me to stay calm and that the police were on their way, just 2 minutes out. Waiting for them felt like forever. Every second was longer than the last. Finally, I heard footsteps and voices downstairs. "Police here, if anyone's there. Make yourself known now," they said. I waited until they called out again before I unlocked the door and rushed downstairs. I nearly fell in my hurry. I found 2 officers in the hallway and quickly told them where to go. Everything after that was a blur. They found the intruder in my bedroom. It was the same tall man in the dark coat from the store. They handcuffed him and brought him down. He looked right at me and said, "We are meant for each other, don't ignore me, I'm your boyfriend." It all made sense in that terrifying moment. This was the man from Instagram, the one who had become obsessed with me months ago. After I turned him down and blocked him, he would send more and more aggressive messages. I thought I'd stopped it by cutting contact, but here he was, trying to find me. I felt dizzy, and my knees buckled. I collapsed and woke up on the couch a few minutes later with a police officer beside me. They told me he was now in custody and would be taken to jail. He ended up getting 3 years in prison for breaking into my house. They couldn't charge him with anything more because he didn't have a weapon. But I kept wondering, what if I hadn't seen him go into my bedroom? What could have happened? I didn't want to think about it, but it was really hard not to. That night changed how I saw the world. The lengths a stranger would take scared me a lot for a long time. I'm just glad that I never found out about his real intentions. I had been driving a taxi for over a decade, but nothing had prepared me for the night I picked up my last passenger. It was a typical shift in the city. The streets bathed in the orange glow of street lamps, occasionally cut through by the headlights of other night owls and late workers. It was close to midnight when I received a call from dispatch about a pickup on the outskirts of the city, a relatively deserted area that gave me an uneasy feeling late at night. But a job was a job, and I steered my cab toward the address provided. The rain had started to fall, gentle at first, then growing into a downpour that drummed loudly against the roof of the car. I arrived at the location, an old apartment building that looked like it hadn't seen maintenance in years. The entryway was dimly lit, with a single flickering light bulb hanging from a wire. I pulled up to the curb, and after a minute or so, a figure emerged from the doorway. The passenger was a young woman, her coat hood pulled up to protect her from the rain. She hurried into the back seat, her presence filling the cab with a chill that wasn't entirely due to the weather.
Where to?
I asked, as I always did. Just head downtown. I'll tell you where to stop, she replied. As we drove, I tried to make small talk, a habit I had developed to pass the time and make passengers feel more at ease. However, she wasn't interested, giving only monosyllabic answers. There was a heaviness in the air, thick with silence and the relentless pounding of the rain. We reached the downtown area, and she finally spoke, instructing me to take a left into a narrow street that I knew led to some of the older parts of the city. The buildings here were close together, casting long shadows across the street, even obscuring the weak moonlight. "Stop here," she said suddenly, pointing to an old brick building with boarded-up windows. It didn't look like anyone had lived there in years. I pulled over, feeling the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I looked at her in the rearview mirror and asked, "Are you sure this is the place?" Her face was partially obscured by the shadows, making her features hard to discern. "Yes, thank you," she said, handing me some cash. Before I could give her the change, she had opened the door and stepped out into the rain. I watched her walk towards the dark building, then disappearing inside. Confused and a little unnerved, I waited for a moment, half expecting her to come back out, maybe realizing she had gotten the wrong address. But the street remained empty, with the only sound of rain drumming against my cab. After waiting around 2 more minutes, feeling uneasy and ready to leave, I saw her. The woman burst out of the building and ran towards my cab. I hesitated for a moment, the memory of her unsettling presence during the ride still fresh in my mind. But something in her frantic motions made me stay. I unlocked the door, and she practically threw herself into the back seat, crying and shaking. As soon as she was inside, she blurted out that I needed to drive to get away as fast as possible. I pulled away from the curb and started driving without a clear destination, just knowing we needed to put some distance between us and that building. Between sobs, she explained that she was terrified because of her ex-boyfriend. They had ended their relationship on terrible terms, and she thought she had seen him in her house when she was about to enter, lurking in the kitchen with a knife in his hand. She was also panicked because her dog, who always greeted her at the door, hadn't appeared. She feared the worst, that her ex had harmed the dog, as he had previously threatened to harm them both. I focused on the road as she called the police from her phone, her voice trembling as she described what had happened. I pulled over a few blocks away, waiting with her until the police arrived. During those tense moments, I gave her my number, telling her to reach out if she needed any help later on. What followed in the aftermath of that night was unexpectedly beautiful, despite the horror we, or maybe I should say she, experienced. I later learned her name was Sasha as she called me the next day, not to update me on the incident, but to thank me. She shared that thankfully her dog was unharmed. Her ex had locked the poor animal in the bedroom to keep it quiet. It turned out her ex was indeed there to hurt her. He wasn't in his right mind and had a restraining order against him. He was also taken to a mental health facility for treatment. That call didn't just end there. We clicked instantly, finding easy comfort in each other's voices, and we talked for an hour. This connection blossomed over time, and we started dating. 2 years later, we moved in together. Now, as we approach our wedding date in just 3 weeks, we often reflect on how that terrifying experience brought us together. We see it as a sign, perhaps a strange twist of fate, that we were meant to find each other. Despite the horrific start, it led to a profound bond between us. We are happy and grateful for each day we get to spend together, ready to face whatever life throws our way, as long as we have each other.